I got caught off just a little bit there at the very end of the very first part of our thing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go forward though. But we do need to know that God is our sufficient, that He supplies every need. And that's the end of that first section. So we're going on to section 2. So at verse 9 of chapter 15. So the Lord said to him, "Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon." Abram brought all these things to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. Then goes on in verse 11. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. And as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick, dreadful darkness came over him. Okay, we're going to go ahead and finish reading that here in a minute. So the Lord said to Abram, "Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon." Now, interesting, because these offerings that God told him to bring as a part of this ritual, and this is not the actual covenant. Now, covenant, remember, means cutting. So this is part of what was going to be happening. This is the beginning of the contractual part of the covenant. And Abram said, "How can I know for sure that these things are going to happen?" And God said, "I want you to bring me some animals." And he had him cut them in half. And the ones he had him bring was a heifer, a goat, a ram, each of them 3 years old, along with a dove and young pigeon. Interesting, because 3 is the idea of completion. And so again, this idea of sufficiency. And so he had him, and this is the beginning of that sacrificial system we see later on. The tabernacle, the system of bringing these certain animals, and these animals that he had him bring were the same animals that were brought for all the different offerings that we see later on. The burnt offering, the fellowship offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering. These were all represented right here. And just as a kind of a side note with those offerings, since we're not going to get into that into Exodus later on, the burnt offering would have been whole. That means the whole thing would have been consumed. The fellowship offering was one of relationship between us and God, and that would have been a time of feasting. And then the sin offering would have been like between me and another person. If I knew I had sinned against someone else and I had to bring an offering to make it right between the two of us. And a guilt offering was between me and God. I knew that I had sinned against God, therefore I needed to bring a guilt offering. And then of course you had the grain offerings. But these blood offerings here, the Lord said, "Come and I want you to cut them in half." Now, whenever the people during this day would make a covenant like this, then they would cut these animals in half for 2 different reasons. First of all, is that this is your half, this is my half. We are bringing equal portions into this cutting. The other thing about it is that if I don't keep my side of the bargain, let me be like one of those animals and let me be cut in half. And so that was the idea of the beginning of this contractual part of the covenant. And it was the beginning of the sacrificial system we see that is fulfilled throughout the tabernacle. Even the smoking pot, which would have, of course, been the incense that was always burned before the Lord. And so as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick, dreadful darkness came over him. Don't you hate that when that happens? That whenever we are in the middle of worshiping God, and sometimes there is something that the Lord is warning us about, or something that it just becomes this heaviness in our relationship with Him. Don't be afraid of those times, because the Lord's covenant, His sufficiency, His loving hand, His relationship with you is still there, even during times that we feel like there's this, maybe this sense of dread or something that might be coming that we have no idea what it is. Now, we don't let those things consume us, because God is in control, and He's going to make it all right, and He's going to make it all eventually work out for His glory and for our good, so we're not afraid. But this is what's happening to Abram here, and we can see a snapshot of our relationship, and Abram always looking forward to the better times. But right here we see that he has this darkness that's come over him. And what is that darkness about? And the Lord said to him, "Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there." Now, of course, this is prophecy about what's going to happen to Abram's descendants in Egypt. "But I will I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions." So there you have, even though there's going to be something dreadful happens, but inside it, as a side thing, they're going to come out just fine. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace. In other words, this isn't going to happen during your lifetime, and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here. For the sin of the people that are right here, the Amorites, the people that you're going to overthrow, it has not yet reached its full measure. When the sun had set, the darkness had fallen. A smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river Euphrates, to the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Kadamites, Hittites, Perizzites, Raphaites, Amorites, Canaanites, and Girgashites, and Jebusites. Now, all of those people groups, those are the people that came from, guess what? They came from Ham's line of those descendants. Now, Ham, and then you had Canaan, which was Ham's descendant. I want to go ahead and point that out really quickly because God did not, or Noah did not curse Ham and all of his descendants, even though it was Ham who sinned against his father. He only cursed Canaan, which is a beautiful thing because Ham's descendants also included those of all of Ethiopia, all of the African nations. It was just these people groups right here that were cursed because those were descendants of Canaan, which was a part of the line of Ham. So that's just kind of a freebie. So here we have the Lord establishing the beginnings of the sacrificial system that we see in the tabernacle, the burnt offerings, the fellowship offerings, the sin offerings, the guilt offerings, including the incense being burned, and the Lord God is going between the two pieces. This is the establishment. It doesn't seal it. We're getting to that in a minute. But what it is that God has done is he has said to Abram, I am sufficient. I am everything you need. And I am promising to you. And it's more than a promise. It's deeper than a promise. It's, I will be cut in half in order to make sure that this covenant happens. My part of the bargain is that I will be your sufficient. And your part of the bargain is that you believe that I am your sufficient. Okay, I'm going to be right back. For everybody else, you guys hang on. Pick me back up here in a minute. And we're going to go ahead and finish up these couple of chapters.